Beloved UVMTA members, welcome. I'm really pleased to present Desireé González-Miller, Dr. González-Miller, to the UVMTA chapter presentation, this workshop. We go way back, and her husband is also a remarkable pianist, is a friend of mine too, and she's just a very interesting person who's done a lot of cool work with this. I think everyone knows the festival packets are here, and so we'll turn the time over to Desireé, and we'll go until the hour, and you can stay and ask questions and mix and mingle and whatever. So,
Perfect.
Turn the time over to Desireé.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here with you so much, and I am very much looking forward to talking to you about Latin American piano repertoire. I am Desireé González-Miller. I am originally from Monterrey, Mexico, and I've been here in the U.S. I'm coming up on 18 years, kind of crazy. And I came here to the U.S. To pursue an education in piano performance. So I started at BYU. That's where I met my husband. That's how we know Derek and Michael. And anyway, I pursued all my degrees here in the U.S. and now I'm here. And I reside in Utah with my husband and our kids. And I have been doing a lot of work for the Latin American repertoire. Just advocating for it and just doing a lot of research on it. So I hope you enjoy hearing all of these wonderful pieces, hidden gems in the piano repertoire. My undergraduate professor, Dr. Shumway, you might have heard of him at BYU. He's now an emeritus professor, but he was the very first professor who brought this to me. You should, do some research on Latin American composers and perform more of these Mexican pieces. And that's how I got started with a research grant at UVU. And then I did all my dissertation, doctoral research on the same topic. I expanded it even more. So with all of this in mind, whenever I share this music, it is very, very difficult to access it, to purchase it, to just find it. Most of these pieces, you can find some advanced pieces on IMSLP, for example, but all of this repertoire that we're gonna be talking about is for beginners, for intermediate students, and these pieces cannot be found anywhere. We do have a little bit of an issue in Latin America with piracy and copyrights and copying music. So a lot of this music is passed through generations, through copies of copies of copies of copies that you share with other teachers, that you find randomly online and things like that. But when it comes to following the copyright laws here in the US, and when you want to enter a student into a festival, a competition, a recital, a summer camp, they all require having the original copy. So what do we do there, right? So anyway, I've been doing a lot of work on this, and I collaborated with Hal Leonard in the creation of these two volumes, the piano music of Latin American composers, level 1 for elementary pianists and level 2 for intermediate pianists. So just a little bit about this collection. We're going to be featuring composers from Latin America, from Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Chile, and all of these wonderful composers. I have a list of repertoire of over 100 works, but it was just so difficult for all the copyrights and licensing to work for all the composers in different international territories and continents. So the mix that we have was able to work. And there's nothing like this in our, canon of repertoire. This is the very first time that it's been done. Some of the educational enhancements you see is that all the information about the composers and about the pieces describing the cultural elements that we're going to talk about is both in English and Spanish to reach to a wider audience. The authenticity annotation, we're going to be dealing with manuscripts that we notated, from the score. We didn't add anything else other than fingerings. There is just one score that I'll show you towards the end of the presentation that we do use the fingerings from the composers because he provided them. And then very pedagogically valuable selection, pieces that are just going to cover many musical concepts. And it was a long project. The research was 10 years, plus, but the publishing part of it was about 5 years. So just so grateful for Helen to work on all the licensing and lawyers, copyright, and everything to make this work. So we're going to start with the elementary level. And just to kind of get an idea of the definition of this level, these are our most popular repertoire books that we use. The Royal Conservatory, the Keith Snell, the Festival Collection by Helen Marley, and you might see a lot of these Jane McGrath leveling as well, very popular these days. So just so you get an idea, right here, I put the leveling next to these collections so you get an idea of what level we're going to be talking about. So, for example, the early elementary right here, we're going to cover from early elementary to late intermediate. So these would be Celebration Series book 5, 6, right? For the Snell, around the same. And then Helen Marley also had a similar leveling, and McGrath, she hasn't done a lot of leveling for Latin American repertoire yet, but you get kind of an idea as well on how she's leveling there. What are some of the leveling considerations? The technical, musical, reading, and rhythmic aspects. For example, for the technical elements that we want to look into for our elementary pianists, we want to look that their hand position stays within the 5-finger position, but also expanding a little bit into 1 octave and towards the end of the volume to 2 octaves. And the keyboard usage for our little beginners, sometimes it's a little bit hard to go all the way up or all the way down. So we do want them to feel comfortable right here in the middle range. For tempo, we want to probably not go above anything allegretto. We're not going to do vivace presto or anything like that. And apply technique passages. We want to see those 5-finger patterns. We want to see the broken chords and arpeggios and cadential chords as well. For musical, we want to see dynamics that are contrasting, but also not very, very difficult to produce. If you are asked sometimes for a triple forte, little kids, they're gaining their strength. So we might not want to see something with triple forte or pianissimo or something like that. For articulation, we want to teach them contrasting touches, the legato, staccato, some accents are okay. For phrase shaping, we're going to be focusing a lot on shaping one melody with both hands, and then the homophonic texture with our right hand melody and the left hand accompaniment, and that balance between the melody and the accompaniment. For reading, the texture is going to be important. Again, as I was mentioning, the homophonic texture, melody and accompaniment, and sometimes switching that between hands. The melodic direction, we want them to be, stepwise, maybe a little bit of skips and steps mixed up, but not super big leaps, because they're learning reading. So all of that stepwise motion is going to be important. Ornaments, we're going to be dealing with grace notes at most. We're not going to be doing gruppettos or anything more complex. Patterns, as I was talking about with the technique, patterns for scales, for arpeggios. Key signatures, we want to stick to maybe 1 or 2 sharps or flats because they're learning how to follow those. And clef changes, maybe we're not dealing as much with that, just to not confuse them yet. In terms of rhythm, we are going to stick to maybe up to the 8th note, a little bit of those 16th notes by rote probably, the meter, only simple meter, and tempo indications, nothing faster than an allegretto, probably. So in the classical spectrum of compositions, it is very rare for classical composers sometimes to have pieces for early beginners. So there's a gap there that exists. So I also wrote some compositions to bridge that gap. For example, you won't see a very easy piece by Chopin or Mozart. Well, Mozart does have some minuets and things like that, but even then, they are maybe a level 2 or so. So this piece is called La Piñata. You are familiar with piñatas. We have those in our parties. Give us an excuse to party. And piñatas were evangelical tools. Piñatas already existed when Hernán Cortés came to colonize the Mexican territory. The Aztecs already had piñatas also to celebrate different holidays. And they converted the piñatas, meaning the Spaniards, they converted them as an evangelical tool. They had 7 little peaks right here, symbolizing the 7 deadly sins, in English, deadly sins, right? In Spanish, we call them capital sins. But, and all of those, for breaking the piñata, you were getting rid of your sins. And the heavenly reward was the candy coming out of the piñata. So the Spaniards used this already existing tool by the Aztecs. But in any case, piñatas now have, just for party purposes. We use them for birthdays, for New Year's, for just all sorts of occasions. So I wrote this piece and I'll play it for you. Very lively. I love using this piece for students to learn also about the different accidentals and modulation. So here we go with La Piñata. So this piece is actually based on the dale, 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 means hit it, hit it, hit it, or swing it, swing it, swing it, depending on the translation. And this is the song that we sing as people are hitting the piñata. And that way, all the kids get the same amount of time. so nobody goes any extra and breaks the piñata all of a sudden. So that's La Piñata. I also have them pre-recorded, sorry. Okay, so the next piece is by the Argentinian composer Alfredo Otero. He's a living composer. He's so wonderful. He studied at the National Conservatory of Bulgaria, and he's also a violinist. And his compositions have been performed abroad, and right now he is focusing on being the conductor of the Third Age Chamber Orchestra and other ensembles in Buenos Aires. This piece that he wrote, Arroyo Cristalino de Mendoza, the crystalline stream of Mendoza. It's a beautiful option to introducing to our students the concept of playing with both hands together. The left hand has a slow harmonic rhythm, but then the beautiful projection of the melody is something that they'll have to work on, that balance. And just to show you a little bit of the work that we did with the engraving, making sure that there's enough space for the students to visualize the number of beats in the measure, other indications for teachers. Sometimes when the students see a score that is not appropriately engraved, it seems all of a sudden way more complicated than it is. So by spacing things out, by using the right sizing, spacing everything. So, Arroyo Cristalino de Mendoza. So, no, thank you. So, just like I said, very slow harmonic rhythm, just beautiful, and it can help them with their balance. The next, here we go. Our next composer, Manuel Ponce. He is our most popular, probably, Mexican composer. He was a pianist, composer, and musicologist. And he studied in Mexico when he was growing up. Then he went to Italy, Germany, and France. In Italy, he studied with Enrico Bossi, Cesare Dall'Olio, and Luigi Torchi. I think Cesare Dall'Olio and Luigi Torchi were also Puccini's teachers for composition. For Germany, he studied piano at the Stern Conservatory with Martin Cross, who was a student of Franz Liszt. And in France, he studied in France twice at different times in his life, but he studied with Nadia Boulanger and Paul Dukas. And not that long ago, I think within Nadia Boulanger's archive, she had some of the compositions by her students, and they found a new piece by Ponce. So they're still discovering things here and there. And his style is a little bit eclectic. It's a little bit of a mix of that Lisztian influence, Chopin influence with the romantic genres, but he mixes it up with the Mexican folk songs and dances. And later in his life, he becomes a little bit more modern because he went, to France, and he learned that style from Nadia Boulanger and Paul Dukas. And he's considered to be the father of Mexican romantic nationalism. There's going to be another movement, the indigenous nationalism, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But he started the romantic nationalism, and he wrote over 240 pieces for piano. Just wonderful, wonderful contributions. I went to the archive in Mexico City where they have all of his scores, manuscripts, first editions. And this quote was written in the back of his grade scorecard when he studied with Paul Dukas. So it said, Ponce's compositions bear the hallmark of the most distinguished talent and have long been unable to be classified into a student category. I hesitate about giving him any grade, even if it is the highest, to express my satisfaction of having had such a distinguished and personal pupil. And right there, I'm holding one of his assignment notebooks from when he was studying in France with Paul Dukas. And I just thought it was so wonderful to see his writings as a student. You never know if your notebooks will end up in an archive, so let's make them pretty.
We had one of our piano performance majors play Ponce in their jury this semester.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Yes, we'll talk about that intermezzo. So such a nice piece. And then here he is, Ponce is looking at his teacher's head, but he's looking down right there. He was a very, very good friend with Joaquin Rodrigo, a wonderful composer and guitarist. He is right there next to him. And right here, Ponce is right here towards the left. You can see him with his white hair. He's right there. Right there. And something that he did was a very similar work as to that of Bartók. He will go to the villages, the towns, the different communities and collect tunes and folk dance, songs and everything to then mix them up with the classical style. And I just love this picture of him directly seeing the indigenous girls right there in the back. And this quote is from an interview he gave to a magazine in Mexico. And he was reporting on a musicology conference that he organized and was speaking at. So he says, I spoke about folklore of the disdained songs I collected from these people's lips, and of the songs I heard at the state of my father worked as an accountant when I was a boy. They called me Zapatista because I defended the poor. You might have heard of Zapata, the Mexican revolutionary, hero that we have in Mexico. He defended the poor people in the South in the revolution. So he was defending the real Mexican roots. So that's why they call him Zapatista. And I just love seeing him collecting those songs from the indigenous girls. The next piece is next couple of pieces actually will be from his 20 Easy Pieces. And they're all based in Mexican elements, like, for example, not to make you hungry, but there's one about Song of the Tamales. So, yeah. There are pieces about the god of the rain and the god of the sun, things like this. How the Aztecs were very much into all the different gods. And the one I will play for you next is called Cielito Lindo, Beautiful Darling. And I think this song could be considered the second Mexican anthem. You'll hear it and you'll recognize it. Let me see if it plays well. I took this video from a program the church does in Salt Lake City every year with Latinos. So as you can see, people go wild with this one. So this arrangement is by Ponce. It's a popular Mexican song, usually played with mariachi and the whole band. This is his transcription of Cielito Lindo. So Cielito Lindo. I love that Ponce is already thinking in pedagogical terms of not only the right hand gets to shape the melody and project the melody, but the left hand too. So that, we don't get to Liebestrom by Liszt and we don't know what to do with that left hand melody. So there's Cielito Lindo. Our next piece is also from this set and is called Danza de los Tecuanes, the Dance of the Tigers. And in Puebla, Mexico, there's a festival that happens every year, and it talks about the indigenous people trying to get the harvest for the year, and there are tigers around. So in this video, you'll see the little interaction of the tiger. It's a traditional dance and festival. So Danza de los Tecuanes. Just to point out, there will be a little drum and a little reed flute that we'll see. It will be very important for the piano transcription. That takes some skill to play that melody and the drum. Yes. Steady beat. So you get the idea. I'll let you watch her on YouTube to see what happens at the end. If who wins, the tiger or our guys right here. So Danza de los Tecuanes, Dance of the Tigers. Another transcription here by Ponce. We'll hear the drum in the left hand and the little flute in the right hand. So here we go. So a very nice mix of that texture that Ponce saw in this dance. Our next composer, Mario Ruiz Armengol. Oh my goodness, I just love all of his compositions. If I have to compare him to someone maybe in the US, I think I will say very similar to Gillock. Do you know William Gillock? Just very beautiful harmonies, colorful, just really nice. Which sometimes can be something that we don't see as much in pedagogical repertoire. It's a little more simple, in terms of harmony, but just really nice pieces. So he was a conductor and he was very involved in radio and film scoring. And he studied harmony and counterpoint with José Rolón, another nationalist composer in Mexico. And he wrote many pieces for children, for piano, chamber music, just all sorts of compositions. He was from Veracruz, Mexico, from the coast. And the piece that I'm going to have here is called Gina. Let me pull that up on this one. There you go. Let's see. Here. So as you can see, thank you. Right here we have again another composer who's also making that left hand work a little more. And we see those patterns of broken triads going up, going down, broken arpeggios, contrary motion a little bit, some really nice pedagogical material. Our next composer is going to be from Brazil, Oscar Lourenço Fernandes, and he is mostly known as Lourenço Fernandes. That's why I have just, the O right there. And he defied his parents a little bit about studying music. They didn't want him to, but he did. And he founded the main conservatory in Brazil. He wrote a concerto for piano and about 80 pieces for solo piano. His piece right here is going to be Despertar, which means awakening. and you'll hear the little trumpet calls. Something I love about this piece is the use of chords and also a little bit of that imitation. Again, we're trying to prepare our students for all of these elements that we'll see in classical music. So, despertar. So that's Despertar. Oh, thank you. By Oscar Lorenzo Fernandez. Okay, so for our intermediate level, what are our pedagogical considerations? Whenever I get an intermediate student, there are some technical challenges that we see in this specific group. I think this group struggles a little bit with developing that even touch, even 16th pattern, or sometimes even the 8th notes as well. And just learning all the different rhythmic patterns that you can have for mix and matching the 8th notes and the 16th notes. So the repertoire in this second collection will be tackling that. Pedaling is another issue. They're learning about that, not only technical aspect of doing, just moving your foot with coordination, but also just hearing the musical aspect of it. And of course, preparation for larger scale classical works. We already talked a little bit about that Baroque imitation for the classical, that balance, the romantic with pedaling, with shaping expression, and contemporary, just getting used to all of the dissonance that we see in contemporary composers like Shostakovich, Prokofiev, even some jazzy harmonies with Ravel, Impressionist with Debussy, and motivation. I think the beginner group makes progress, and they're feeling really good, and then intermediate comes and it gets a little tricky, and there's a little bit of a plateau there. So I think it's very important for them to have pieces that they're looking forward to practice. Pieces that will make them shine, that they'll love. Another piece right here by Alfredo Otero. We already talked about him, but this is his Pampeana Argentina. Let me get the other part right here. And I just love this piece for the use of our wrist and expressive shaping. So I'll get this one from here. Okay. Really nice, thank you. I love this piece because it stretches the hand of the student a little more in that octave. And this is why this is for intermediate students, so that their span is a little more comfortable with expanding to that 7th just a little more open for that hand. Oops. See, I'm prepared for if things go wrong, the result is ready, pre-recorded. Our next composer, Blas Galindo, another Mexican composer, he studied with Carlos Chavez at the National Conservatory, and he was part of the group of 4 composers, kind of like the Russian 5, but the group of 4 was the Mexican thing right there. And they were, their purpose was to find those indigenous musical themes and implement them in their compositions. He also studied with Copland, and he was a professor of composition at the National Conservatory in Mexico City. So let's take a look at his piece. His piece is called 5+5, 5 plus 5. And I think this is a great piece for, again, imitation that we'll see in Baroque pieces. So that, our students, when they get to those inventions, even the two-part inventions can be a little bit tricky to explain with the counterpoint. This hand is doing the theme, and then the left hand is trying to also shape the theme. So little by little, I think we're preparing our students for those big pieces. Let me get that 5+5. Here we go. And thank you. I love that for this piece, we are seeing and training our hands to be independent. The slurs won't quite always happen at the same time. So we're training our students to, while one hand is still connecting, one is lifting to do our other phrase, but way simpler material than a Bach invention, like I was saying. So that they come to this repertoire a little more comfortable with all of these concepts. Okay, our next piece, sorry, I'm skipping. Another piece by Mario Ruiz Armengol. I forgot to mention, Duke Ellington used to call him, his nickname for Mario Ruiz Armengol was Mr. Harmony. So I think that's very, very suiting for him. This piece is called In the Garden, and I think it's just one of my very favorite pieces from this book. Although I might say that about every piece. Let me get this one real quick. Over here. Okay. I just skip to the coda just so that we can save a little bit of time right there. Our next piece by Eito Villalobos from Brazil. He was a very prolific composer, but it's very hard to find, all the sets and everything. He wrote over 2,000 works. That's up there with Liszt, just so many pieces. And his style was influenced by the Brazilian folk music, indigenous music from Portugal, Africa, and Latin American. So, and on top of that, he combined all of these elements with the Western classical music tradition. He was friends with the Rios Milhaud and Arthur Rubinstein. And in fact, Arthur Rubinstein premiered one of his most famous compositions, A Prole do Bebê, The Baby's Family. So his piece is going to be A Moda da Carranquinha, and it's a nice way to introduce our students to waltzes and tempo changes. So let me just pull this one up right here. For the longest time, we're always, with our students, keep a steady tempo throughout the whole piece. But here, we have a little bit of a tempo fluctuation. So how do we teach our students to do that? A concept that, again, you'll find in Chopin ballades, some nocturnes. Little by little, they're developing their self sense of pulse. The next piece is by Carlos Chavez. Carlos Chavez is considered the father of indigenous nationalism in Mexico, and he really helped with that Mexican identity in music. He was actually Ponce's student, piano student, not composition student, piano student. And when I was in the archive, I saw a program of a recital that they organized in Mexico City. Ponce organized this recital with only music by Debussy. It was the very first time that Debussy's music was being performed in Mexico. And there was Carlos Chavez as a little kid playing some Debussy. I can't remember what piece he played, but he was already right there influenced with modernism. And as I mentioned, he incorporated those indigenous Mexican aesthetics with dissonance and classical forms. He has a Sinfonía India, if you get a chance on YouTube, wonderful piece. So his piece that we're going to listen to is going to be Prelude number 5 from 10 Preludes for the Piano. And this prelude is a little bit more modal. It's going to be our modern piece, one of the modern pieces here for this second volume. Again, to expose our students to a little bit of that dissonance. It's also going to be a very good tool for switching between triplets and eighth notes, those rhythmic patterns. So, prelude number 5. Let's see. The prelude is hiding. Oh, here we go. So a little modal, a little pentatonic. Let's see. So just a little bit of a different taste right there. Let's see. Our next piece is going to be by Luis Janeo, an Argentinian composer. And his style is really interesting. It's also a little bit dissonant. And he reflects the national ideas from Argentina. I have some of the pieces by him. This one is called Zapateado, and it's all about tap dancing, right? And just as how these very skilled dancers create all the percussive sound with their feet using different parts of, their shoe with the heel, the side, and different angles of, using the shoes. I love this piece for the use of articulation. You'll see the staccatissimo, you'll see some accents, you'll see staccatos, you'll see legatos. So the same elements that we're seeing in the dance, we'll see them right here in the piece. So a little bit of this one, because I don't want to take forever. I'll put the recording. Oops. So he's a little bit of a Ginastera, but for kids. Dissonant, very lively, really great pieces of music. And then, just because of time, we're going to just play an excerpt of that one. The last two pieces are going to be by Ponce. And I'm excited to show you about these ones. When I did my research right there in the archive, I discovered a piece that had never been published before. And the National Autonomous University of Mexico allowed me to publish it. So this is the premier publication. This piece has never been published since it was written in 1894. So it makes me so happy that it's now out there for everybody to play. This piece is a prelude, and it was written when he was 12 years old. And I just love how we can see his creativity with color, also in the style of Chopin, because those were the references they had in the 19th century, romantic music, but very creative for 12 years old. I mean, our 12-year-olds, some of them are already on TikTok and doing those kinds of things, but I'm just very impressed with his writing at 12 years old. So the premier edition of this and is urtext, so only what Ponce wrote. I'll use this one because it's a little easier to flip the pages. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So that's Ponce's Prelude. And the last piece that we'll do today is going to be the Intermezzo by Ponce. This piece, as you can see, I worked from the manuscript. The middle picture right there is the only existing copy on IMSLP that has all sorts of writings and from who knows who wrote it, but that is the available copy. And then we have our urtext edition here in this volume. So beautiful piece. I think it's probably the most famous composition for piano in Mexico, probably up there with the whole Latin American continent. So Intermezzo, beautiful piece. Here we go with the Intermezzo. Well, I have the whole thing. Well, I'll have a little bit more of there. Okay. Thank you. So the Intermezzo by Ponce, again, Urte's edition, only what he wrote, and he was the one who added those fingerings once in a while there on the second page. So everything you see on the score is by him. So thank you so much for coming today and letting me share all of these Latin American pieces with you. I don't know if you guys have any questions or... Yes.
Do the books have biographical information?
Yes, they have everything in English and Spanish. This is, as I mentioned, the first edition ever in Latin American too. So for example, right here we have about the composers in English, and then, all in Spanish as well. So all the notes for the composers, biographies in English and Spanish, and all the pedagogical and cultural notes. So what is the piece about? All the piñata stuff, is all in, writing there. So yes, it has all the information there. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Any other questions?
Are
Yes.
they on Amazon, or where do you...
Yes, you can get them on Amazon or the Halaner website. Mm-hmm. I think those are probably the easiest ways to purchase them in the U.S. Nowadays, I think you can also find them in a lot of just websites that fulfill orders. Like, for example, I saw them at Walmart, if you have, Walmart points, or Target, and they fulfill the order, and, that also works. I think the easiest is probably the Halaner website, and especially if you already have an account there and need more teaching materials, there's more discounts there, and then the Amazon. Super easy for Prime. Yes, super convenient.
That's another question.
Yes.
I noticed a lot of the terms in there are in Spanish.
Yes.
And a lot are used to only the Italian.
Italian, yes.
So what do you recommend as a resource to translating those?
Yes, well, a lot of the pedagogical notes have the translations there for you, but I think you can Google it, just like we will with the Italian terms, or maybe these days will be ChatGPT it. I think ChatGPT has pretty good translation skills. Is that a thing? It has skills. But yes, they're very straightforward. I think sometimes the Italian words can have a little bit of different or more fluctuating translations, but the Spanish ones, I think they're pretty straightforward, yeah.
I love that you maintained that authenticity.
Yes, absolutely, yes, just everything that we saw in the scores, and as I mentioned, these pieces are just so difficult to find, and to just find them in a compilation, it's pretty rare for different countries. We had way more composers too, that we wanted to include, but some of the publishers or copyright owners were not willing to work with Halaner. So, licensing, copyright, lawyers get involved. And so, this is a mix that work together. For example, other composers have licensing that they can only be sold in Europe and Latin America, but not Asia, or, So a mix of composers that works together was pretty tricky, but we were able to find a mix that worked together very nicely. Yes. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
How old were you when you started playing the piano?
I started when I was very young. I was 2.5. My mom is a piano teacher, and I grew up in Mexico. So my parents are Mexican and everything, and she was my very first piano teacher. So I will just watch her teach. My mom says that I will get upset at 2.5 years old because students could not find middle C. Here it is. And in Mexico back then, we only had the John Thompson book. Is still a thing, right? So I learned with that book, and my mom says these things. I don't know, but she said that by the time that she said, okay, I'm gonna teach you formal lessons, I could play the book by ear, just because I saw her teaching everything. So, those were my musical beginnings in Mexico, and it's been so fun, yes. So I spent 20 years in Mexico, then 18 almost years in the US, so almost half and half.